Hello.
Hola. Hello and welcome to Mr. Smith History. Today we'll be looking at the reasons for the English victory against Spain, and we'll be sort of looking at the different factors which led to the defeat of the Spanish Armada. So what happens with the Armada? Well, on the 29th of July, that's when they're first spotted by the English sailing up the English Channel. This leads to a battle on the 31st of July. This is the Battle of Plymouth. 2 Spanish ships are captured during this battle, which is great news for the English. Then the Spanish continue moving round, resulting in another battle on the 3rd of August. This is the Battle of the Isle of Wight. There, the Spanish ships are outgunned, and the English force them round the Channel even further. The Spanish are desperate to meet up with the Duke of Parma and his men in Holland, and they sail on towards Calais. There, on the 8th of August, they are met by the English again, and this is the Battle of Gravelines. This is a fateful battle for the Spanish, as the English use fire ships to disrupt the fleet, to break up the Armada completely, and ships are scattered far and wide. So we're going to have a look at some of the problems that the Spanish faced, and which sort of resulted in them getting defeated. And one of the big problems they had was communication. The Armada was led by the Duke of Medina Sidonia. Now, he needed to be in contact with the Duke of Parma, but the problem was there was no communication. A big problem was that the Spanish had no control over the deep water ports in the Netherlands. The rebels, backed by Elizabeth, controlled Ostend, which was the only deep water port. So the Duke of Parma had no access to that at all. So the only way they could meet with the Armada was going out in smaller ships and meeting them. But of course, this makes communication much more difficult. Another problem that the Spanish had was the fact that the English were much better prepared and much better armed than they were. The English ships could fire their guns at a faster rate. The way they were mounted on carriages meant that they could be fired and reloaded much quicker than the Spanish were able to do. So what the English lacked in numbers in terms of ships, they were able to make up for in firepower, and they made the most of it, damaging a fair number of Spanish ships. An immense problem for the Spanish was their ships lacked supplies and provisions. So the food that they had, the ships were at sea for a long time. So they were at sea for around 10 weeks. So they were at sea for a long time, and the food began to rot. So not only were people going hungry, this started to affect the Spanish's morale. Yeah. So if you've got tired, hungry men who are feeling down, then that's going to affect their ability to fight, and it did. By the time the Armada reached Gravelines, it was in complete disarray. The English used their fire ships and sent them into the fleet, and the Spanish literally panicked. Captains of ships just started cutting the anchors and just setting them free, and they were just sailing and crashing all over the place. It was absolute mayhem. Ships began to drift everywhere, and they began to drift off into the North Sea. Of course, the weather played a huge part in the destruction of the Armada. Winds took the ship up north, took all the fleet up north around the north of Scotland, and they headed down the west coast of Ireland. But their gale force winds took hold of the fleet and wrecked them onto the west coast, smashing ships up onto the rocks, decimating the majority of the fleet.
Meow.
So although the weather is often credited as being one of the main causes of the Spanish loss, it would be wrong to sort of forget and dismiss the British tactics. The British were getting in close enough to fire rapid shots onto the Armada, but staying far enough away so their ships couldn't be boarded. And also, as we've already mentioned, Drake's use of the fire ships was an inspired move, which caused absolute panic. And without that, these ships would not have gone up round the north, at the north of the island, resulting in being wrecked on the Irish coast. So Philip and the Armada are defeated. What we'll have a look at in the next video is the consequences of this. So does this mean that the war with Spain is over? No. The next video will sort of cover what this meant for Elizabeth and what followed. So thank you for watching Mr. Smith History.